They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
Man, that's some great song, isn't it? Isn't that crazy good? Like, really, I love to have the chords to that. All right, so we're back. My goodness, the madness never stops. I'm Dana, by the way. You're doing well. You can call into the live shows at 709-589-4406. We're going to lose that number in the next week or two. I'm going to get another number, I guess, soon. And we're trying to keep the show alive, right? These presentations. Meet the woman refusing to be silenced by Japan's far right. Now, we touched on that story last night. She's getting death threats because she denounced the racism against foreigners and women. And so a lot of people are complaining to their local government office about her because she says it's wrong. They say it's we're Japan, we're racist and bigoted and prejudiced and biased. And she's a lawmaker, as a vocal critic of Japan's first party, Sanseito. So apparently that party thinks it's okay to be bigoted, racist, and prejudiced. So if Japanese come to your countries and they encounter racism, the Japanese government will publicize that worldwide with the medias and denounce it. But if they do it to you, it's considered okay. And if somebody objects to it in their country, then she should be violently opposed. they're poisoning the whole planet with radioactive fallout from the nuclear meltdowns. They're still growing food in the nuclear wasteland. They destroyed their own country. There's a significant mental illness associated with radioactive fallout, particularly in the nuclear wasteland like Japan. The entire country is a nuclear wasteland now. And it ain't just Japan, unfortunately. A Japanese politician who campaigned against discrimination is refusing to so-called shut up. She's refusing to denounce the racism and bigotry and prejudice and bias. That's an admirable attribute, or am I wrong? The Japanese will say I'm wrong, but not all of them, I'm sure. But apparently enough. Her local assembly passed a motion requesting she stop posting to social media with her official title. Well, what's the point of official title if you can't oppose the most bigoted and racist and prejudiced and biased attributes in your society? What's the point of that? See? Has denounced prejudice against immigrants and women on social media platform. Yeah, women are very low on the status poll. They're objects to the Japanese. There's really no other way to describe it. She posted messages such as oppose discrimination against foreigners and said that I will not tolerate hate against foreigners in social networking sites. She gets bomb threats, death threats. Her comments have prompted dozens of complaints from the public to the assembly. Can you imagine the hubris, the arrogance to contact the government because one of the politicians complained about the incredible amount of hate towards tourists in their country. I mean, they had 38 million tourists last year. There's a lot of money walking into that country. And they're eating a lot of radioactive food and getting sick and going home and losing their lives from it. As well as a message on the city's website threatening to kill Fukushima and bomb the city hall. Well, how come the police are not involved and arrest the people that are making those threats? Does that sound stupid? Or instead of getting the police involved and going after these crazy extremists, they go after the person that's trying to defend the victims. It makes sense when you realize what they've done to our planet for the last 14 years, I guess. Threats of murder and bombing. And no police, no people arrested. They want to silence the person that the people hate for having a moral compass. Imagine how terrifying it is for her every day. I stand against racism. In English. On top of that, bless her heart. Let me say clearly, unequivocally, and without reserve, I'm enormously proud of this lady. I absolutely adore her for what she's doing. Bless her heart. The Monday she posted she would not shut up, saying the resolution infringes on her no, the police should arrest the people that are hurtling violent in a like what kind of society doesn't invoke 8 years on, water rose threatens Fukushima cleanup. 8 years on. Excuse me. 8 years on. Should I, 8 years on. Fresh, this is Okuma, which is 8 years later, was still abandoned, and still should be abandoned, which is connected to the nuclear site itself. Fresh obstacle threatens to undermine the massive cleanup. 1 million tons of contaminated water must be stored possibly for years. So they're talking about water, they're pouring over a nuclear meltdown. And they're claiming that they're recovering it from the nuclear meltdown, which obviously is impossible. And that they're storing it in tanks, which again is impossible because you're pouring it over nuclear fuel, so it's full of fuel. The water that they're pumping up has fuel particles. So if you store that in a container, you can have easily have a criticality, a chain reaction in the containers. And when you're putting a lot of it in these big 300,000 gallon tanks, you can have a meltdown. And which means, that whole area becomes off limit for thousands of years. You can't do it. You can't store this stuff. And then work for years and years and allegedly create some kind of filtration system, so-called ELPS. You can't filter it. You can't put it, like when it's going through the pipes, you're depositing fuel particles in the pipes that is transferring it, which means you can't go near the pipes. You can't walk over the pipes without getting significant, brutal doses. If you stand alongside it for a few minutes, you could get a lethal dose. You're talking about multiple sieverts per liter on top of that, acknowledged. We talked about that a little bit last night. Just let me bring up just a quick reference point for you. My words should be enough, but that's not how you really run a good educational program. You try to provide as much documentation as you can. Bear with me. I'm pretty good at it, but I'm not the best. So I'm working all day trying to get what's known as a Canadian pension established. It could take me 3 months. So it's quite disappointing. And it's just the bureaucracy itself. That leaves me very vulnerable for 3 months. I have no way of surviving for those 3 months. So what I'm trying to say is a lot of stress on me, right? Impossibly high World Health Organization's initial, which is UN, initial report estimated Tokyo, 36 million people, and Osaka, 600 miles away, infant thyroid doses at 10 to 100 millisieverts. And at Nami, a kilometer or 7 kilometers away from the meltdowns, 100,000 millisieverts is 100 millisieverts is 100,000 microsieverts. These are just horrific doses we're talking about, catastrophic health consequences. Up to 1 full sievert in Nami, which is 7 kilometers away. 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation. And the actual numbers were 2.2 sieverts. That particular story reported at 2,000 millisieverts, which is 2 sieverts. So if you had 2 leaders sitting there, and you're sitting around a table with 30 of your best friends, all of you would be dead in about 20 minutes. Your organs would actually melt from being in proximity to those kind of doses. So imagine filling tanks up that are not very thick and capable of shielding anybody walking within, hundreds of feet from these lethal doses. So imagine having full tanks of this stuff, like 300,000 gallons, 1.2 million liters at multiple sievers. Now, they're only talking about beta. You can't just have beta. You got to have alphas, neutrons, and gammas in the same sample. So now you're talking about 7, 8, 9 sieverts per liter. So a liter of it in an elevator. Everybody takes that elevator. Everybody, no exceptions, will die for millions of years. Just having it in the wall of the elevator, for instance. So now consider 300,000 gallon tanks, 1.2 million sieverts in a tank. And the tank is full, there's multiple tanks that are full, and you're there as a welder building more tanks right alongside of it. What's the odds that you don't get a fatal dose? That possibility is zero. It's absolutely zero. And so if you're honest about this stuff, then you know that the tanks are empty. Because the lines and everything else, the tanks were built as a temporary solution, allegedly. A temporary solution to manipulate you into thinking that they had it under control. Everything is flushed out into the ocean. There's nothing put in tanks. And we know that again because they're dismantling tanks. So if you fill the tanks up with this kind of stuff, and that's what they're talking about, you can never get near, if you drain the tank, for instance, you can't filter it because you can't change the filter and you can't get near the hoses and the pipes. And if you look at the filtration system they talked about, and there's pictures available of the ELP system, then it's all pipes all over the place, right? Which means you can't get back in that building ever again. And that the whole story is just, it's all straw man arguments that they throw out there. There's no dissenting voices. There's no debates. The experts are well-known apologists for the nuclear industry, and the groups like Greenpeace and that have absolutely, who are getting enormous donations. Like, it's absurd, or it's an unbelievable betrayal, a catastrophic and a betrayal. So the filtration system wasn't completed until early 2015. So how could they, like a typical reactor, a running reactor, before it starts overheating, but if it overheats, it needs more water. But before it overheats, it needs 6.45 million one-ton pickup trucks. That's the equivalent of water in a 24-hour period. So what happens when it goes from 600 degrees to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures? How much water you got to pour on it? The official story was something like they were recovering 120,000 liters a day. They were pouring 120,000 liters a day or something like that. Or 120 tons, rather, which is less than a garden hose. Like your typical garden hose will produce about 140 tons of water a day at 30 pounds per square inch. So suggesting that they built all these tanks alongside of full tanks is absurd to suggest that the tanks were full. And because they're in a brutal earthquake zone, and there was an event about 4 years ago, a significant earthquake 60 miles off, in the same spot, right on tectonic plates off the Fukushima nuclear power plant. And around 50 tanks had shifted. So if those tanks were full, they wouldn't have shifted. It's a terrible industry. It's an industry that the world will regret not fighting. Last year, Tokyo Electric Power Company and the people that are covering up for the nuclear industry will regret doing that too. Maybe not publicly, certainly, but subconsciously they'll regret it because they destroyed the lives of everything they coveted. Last year, Tokyo Electric Power Company said a system meant to purify contaminated waters failed to remove the dangerous radioactive contaminants. It means most of the water stored in 1,000 tanks, which were all built in 2013, will need to be reprocessed before it is released into the ocean, most likely scenario for disposal. Well, why not? Why do you have to dump it into the collective, the ocean? Why would you do something like that? Well, you got a legacy of doing it, but why would you now? We recognize that this is a terrible thing to do to an ecosystem that the entire biosphere is dependent upon. The most likely scenario for disposal. And there's nobody to hold them accountable. And the people that allegedly the checks and balances, like the crazies, like the International Atomic Energy Agency, other so-called watchdogs, these are not watchdogs, clearly. They're not only the promoter of nuclear, but they're the watchdog. Right, so you can't be both. And Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency, UN. "8 years on, water rose threatens Fukushima cleanup." This was March the 8th, 2019, a couple of days before the 8th anniversary. Reprocessing could take nearly 2 years to divert personnel and energy from dismantling the tsunami-wrecked reactors. Divert personnel, reprocessing, which is all automated, by the way. So how's it going to divert personnel from dismantling the tsunami-wrecked reactors, which calling these tsunami-wrecked reactors, again, is very dishonest. It wasn't a tsunami that wrecked the reactors, for starters. It was the... Well, it did, I guess, but there was the not the hydrogen, but the pressure reactor overheating and exploding. So this is a really good example, reactor 3 and reactor 4. You can't dismantle these reactors. And you can use remote control, you got to use remote control cranes to do anything. So diverting personnel is not an issue. Those people, they spent $48 billion just picking up 30 million one-ton bags. There is no price limit on nuclear meltdowns. Right? You can't just say, well, this is all the money we got. Sorry. This is nationalized. The government, the taxpayers are paying for everything. And a lot of that is stolen. And it's just, this industry attracts the craziest, the most unrealistic people we've ever seen. They can be held accountable under racketeering laws. The same with the people that are promoting propaganda. The racketeering law is set up to hold the people that are telling those types of laws accountable. TEPCO's already running out of space to store treated water. Well, first off, they built all the tanks in 2013. This is 2019. They can build space somewhere else, right? And the problem is, if they really put radioactive water pumped up from the Earth after pouring it over nuclear meltdowns, the fuel, if you put that, say, in a transport truck container, and you try to move it somewhere else, you'll kill everybody that's driving the trucks and people on the side of the roads. Because that's the reality of what we're talking about. And should another big quake strike, which of course has struck many times, there's over 1,000 aftershocks right away, experts say the tanks could crack, unleashing tainted, and using the word tainted, this industry is just unconscionable how they're using these terminologies, right? The word tainted has absolutely no place in this conversation. Liquid, tainted liquid. It's nuclear waste. That's what the water you're pouring over the melted reactor cores. If you were able to retrieve some of that water, that's nuclear waste. It's not water. It has nothing to do with water anymore. It can never be water anymore. And it's not tritiated water. It's full of fuel particulates that are splitting atoms and washing highly radioactive debris into the ocean. That's all of us going straight into the ocean. Workers could be seen atop the number 3 building. There is nobody on top of reactor 3. It's absurd to suggest that somebody is on top of Medusa. Right? There's nobody on top of that building. First off, there is no top to the building. You're right alongside of 4 meltdowns and 8 fuel pools. And on March the 15th, there's 4 meltdowns in a row. If just one of those melt down, you can't get near the other ones. If all 4 of them are melt down, you can guess where I'm going. Workers could be seen atop the number 3 building getting equipment ready to lift out the spent fuel rods of a storage pool. That was the propaganda machine. And here's one of the pictures right here. So these are the alleged workers / homeless. These are not academics. These are not journalists. These are not scientists. And they're 100 feet above the wreckage getting the fuel out of the pool because that's where it's located. And they done the same thing at reactor 4. They made the same claims. Right? That's reactor 3 to your left. That's what they were talking about. But remember, they had already made these absurd claims and got away with it. So there's no incentive now not to do it over and over and over for the rest of the reactors. In most areas around the plant, workers no longer need to wear face masks. The homeless, the destitute, victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. And full body suits, the paper suits, the disposable paper suits. They allegedly burn 7,000 paper suits every day in the incinerators. Radioactive suits. Can't destroy radiation by burning a radioactive suit. You just liberate the radioactive elements back into the environment, and that you can't be protected. There was over 5,000 so-called workers in the first month with high doses of internal, what they called internal radiation, that all had paper suits. If you had 7,000 paper suits on, just a single person, it still can't protect you from the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alpha shine. And, we see James is in the comment section. I was actually just texting. James is doing really good. I never got a straight answer from him. I'm assuming he hasn't got a kidney stone anymore, by the sounds of it. And he sounds like he's a lot happier. I gave it away what happened to him. Okay, well, it's too late now. He had a kidney stone. I just didn't feel it was my spot to tell everybody. And I don't think it would have been any harm telling people he had a kidney stone. I don't think that's a bad thing. But it's not my place to tell someone's personal business, right? It's too late now because I already spilled the beans. So, but I was able to glean from he's doing really well. I'm sure he's still recovering from the experience, the shock. I think it takes a few weeks to get over the shock of that experience, because a lot of you who have been around remember me having a kidney stone. I thought I was dying. I actually thought I was dying. I had told my brother-in-law to sell the boat and get me a plot and a coffin and bury me up where Mom and Dad was to. Right? I thought it was a kidney stone. But I didn't know what it was. I thought I was dying. That's how bad that was. And I have a very high tolerance. And I only say that because I've been through a lot. But I thought I was dying. And so they have 7,000 of these face masks. You can't reuse the face mask. Does that look like 7,000 face masks to anybody? No, but I was thrilled to hear that he's actually, to me, it looks like he's doing really well. He's feeling on top of the world. I mean, he's clearly, after going through such a shock for James or anybody else, it takes a while to recover. He's hoping to have another song out tonight, or a video anyway, of some type. And he's got a good subject there. I'm looking forward to it if he gets it. If not, we'll get it tomorrow night, I'm pretty sure. But if any of you went through a kidney stone, you would know why I'm talking the way I'm talking, because it's an experience unlike anything I've ever been through. And I've been through stuff. I've had a pretty interesting life, to say the least. But in about 3 months, I'll be secured again, and it might be earlier than that. Hopefully, I'll let you know if it is. But we're looking like we're gonna just could take 3 months to get sorted out. It's not difficult. It's just the bureaucracy, and I'm very stressed out about it. Like I'm very hesitant. Like I want to go out and buy some groceries, right? I'm eating half a meal twice a day. Just I'm watching everything, right? I'm using. I won't say the other stuff. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I don't go anywhere, right? That I'm able to keep doing what I'm doing, and it's a lot of brutal sacrifices that I've never had to do before, right? And it's not fair. It's an incredible burden upon me, but we made it this far. We're good for till the end of the month, so we'll probably be good till for next month too. But it looks like it. So all we could do is make it one more month after that, and we're in business. That's pretty cool. You got to admit that'll be pretty cool. We got all the whales are emaciated, so somebody needs to tell this story, right? All the birds, and again, like I was up to that. I was talking about an island. I know I'm kind of digressing back and forth. That's not unusual around here. We got an island up here that I've been studying for about 4 years, and we have access to it. And I meant to get up there today, but I was so burnt out and stressed out, I ended up falling asleep. I was up there once, but I wanted to go back, get on the island, and go looking for failed fledglings that didn't survive. And I'm probably going to do it tomorrow morning or something. But I've never seen that island without at least 1,000 birds on it. It's just a bird sanctuary. It's a very accessible place. It's a very weird little spot. Most of them are feeding on the sewage in the harbor right alongside of them, by the way. But where did they go? I've never seen that before. The island. There was people on that island in the spring studying the birds. The birds were there in the spring. There's no food in the tidal zones for the birds to feed on, for instance. And we have another die-off video that I'm not sure if I'm going to do it tomorrow night or not. Because I don't like doing the die-off videos. I just don't like them. And we've already done 2 in the last couple of weeks. But this one needs to be done too. So hopefully I do it tomorrow night. But if not, it'll be next week. Fanning out across the plant's property are enough tanks to fill 400 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Machines called Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS, have treated the water that's inside the tanks. Well, none of this can be, it doesn't work that way. The Riva system, just let me put a marker so I can find my way back to this spot. Because I think I got the other stuff right at my fingertips here. So the Ariva system. Let me see if I got that in my pile right here. Do I got to go? I should have that back in my pile. The so-called ALP system. Yeah, there it is. Here's what it looked like in 2013. New images from Fukushima Daiichi press tour. These images were released by the press pool and show the current condition of Fukushima Daiichi. There are also some flyover shots to show the extent of the expansion of the plant of tanks and other storage. Let's talk about this for a few minutes. Let's get down this road because we haven't really covered it for the last month or something. So 2013, Now, it melted down March 11, 2011. This is February 2013. So this is basically 2 years later. There is no filtration system. The reactors could fill up to 1,000 tanks, a single reactor 6 times a day, with just normal water. So move ahead to August the 9th, the third quarter of 2014. So you're 3.5 years later now. The disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years. Well, it didn't struggle with it. It doesn't have any decontamination system whatsoever. And announced recently, they think they finally have the ALPS decontamination system operational. And that's the acknowledgement of what I was just telling you. But they think, that was an opinion, a conjecture, in August 9, 2014. So 2015, they announced that they had it working. So that would be 4 years later. Okay. So 4 years later, so water accumulated for 4 years. The reactors normally need 6, and we can do the math for you. Let's bring up a calculator. And we're going to cover the ALPS system for the next 5 or 10 minutes here, but let me bring up a calculator so you can appreciate. So the reactors need, now we're going to look at tons, 4,500 tons each minute. And you're going to multiply that by 1,440 minutes in a day and 24-hour period. That's 6.5 million one-ton pickup trucks. That would be the equivalent, to try to give you something you can compare it with. So 6.5 million tons of water per reactor, not for all reactors, but per reactor. And so we're going to multiply that by 1,000, because that's how many liters are in a ton, is 1,000 liters. So 6.48 billion liters. We're going to divide that by 4 to get gallons. So 1.6 million gallons a day. We're going to divide that by the size of the tanks. The tanks are 300,000 gallons, those great big tanks. And so you're talking about 5,400 tanks a day. So a single, now you got 4 reactors with the same predicament, so you're talking about almost 22,000 tanks a day. You can fill up with a normal operating 4 reactors. So one reactor would fill up the tanks 5 times a day, a normal reactor that's not melted down. So it stands to reason when it gets hotter, it needs more water, not less water, right? And so they should have an absurd amount of tanks on that site, right? Do you get where I'm going with this? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everybody. So let's just talk about the ALPS system, just to walk you. There's other things besides the ALPS system. Let me explain that to you. Yeah, it's a lot of stress, but it's okay. Like we done really good in the context of we're still operational. We're still not homeless. That's a good thing, anyway, in my world. But the stress now that I've been under is really, it's extraordinary. I can honestly say I've never been under this kind of stress in my life. It's very difficult for me sometimes. It's a very humbling experience for me on top of that. Okay, here we go. So there's 2 facets to this story. And I'm going to be doing them backwards if I'm not careful. So let me go out. Let me see what I got here. Yeah, so that's the tanks. Okay, that's the first part of the story. There's not a lot to it, but let me go through it for you. So 2013, August the 20th, 2013, Mary Yamaguchi, by the way. Tanks that are crippled. And how do you call a nuclear meltdown crippled, I wonder? A Japan nuclear plant leaks highly radioactive water. Tank. So again, 300,000 liters, 300 tons in a tank, right? That was the mathematical equation that I used earlier, which is 80,000 gallons of highly radioactive water. And I showed you earlier, you're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta. It can't just be beta. So it's around 8 sieverts of neutrons, betas, alphas, and gammas, and x-rays, and everything. So they have about 1,000 steel tanks built across the complex. In 2013. So in that statement, they said they had 1,000 tanks, right? March 10, 2014, the following year, Mari Yamaguchi again, which is the official cover story. When you see the Associated Press, Mari Yamaguchi, that's the official narrative, the official cover story is the best way to perceive it. So then in 2014, they said they had 1,200 industrial tanks that have taken over large parts of the plant. So, which is a really interesting one. This was a former U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission chairperson, Dale Klein. In 2017, they said they had 900 tanks, and around 900 large and densely packed tanks. Okay. Now, this picture, of course, anybody who's been around knows what I'm going to say next is, try walking with both of your heels on the ground. It's the most difficult things. If just stand up and put both of your feet, space them out like that with your heels on the ground, that's very difficult on its own. And put your hands straight down to the side. And you notice what he stood on is not pavement, it's steel. It's steel sheets, 1 inch by 16 feet by 8 foot steel sheets. And they're laid there by a crane to try to mitigate the radiation. So, and in the background, you're looking at the tanks. So think about how the tanks are packed closely together. And think about the width of these tanks. And these tanks were bolted together, and they were so-called leaking highly radioactive water, which means you can't get near the tanks anyway. The whole story is crazy, eh? But if these tanks were full, he couldn't stand up where he stood. And not only that, you couldn't build the other tanks alongside of the full tanks. Japan will have to dump the radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. This is 2019. Coastal nuclear plants commonly dump water that contains tritium, which they can't contain it and they can't get rid of it, so they just dump it. They just decided to make rules up saying they're allowed to do it, and there was no debate, there was no referendums, there was no reports when they changed the laws to make it legal to do it. They didn't come out and tell you; they just made it legal to dump tritium, and it's tritium-3H, not tritium, by the way. It occurs in minute amount in nature. Well, not man-made stuff does not occur in nature. We call man-made anthropogenic. We call it anthropogenic radiation man-made because we make it. It's not part of stardust. It's not the stuff that comes from the solar system that we're acclimated to through genetic superior selection. Because we're already acclimated to everything on the planet through genetic superior selection. Now, if you have concentrations of certain stuff, that's not natural. That's different. And that's harmful, right? But for the natural elements that we encounter in our normal daily lives, we're already acclimated to it. And so like some countries might have 60 times higher so-called background rate, natural background, like radium, than you might have in your country. But you won't see a spike in the cancer because your body's already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection, right? And so potassium, which they claim, is radioactive, and they use that and they conflate it with the man-made stuff. You can buy potassium, bottles of potassium. And you can go to places where there's mountains of potassium. And people work there all day long. And you can dig a hole there and put your blanket in there, and you can live there for 1,000 years and it can't hurt you. It's just potassium. But because in a small way it's considered an emitter, you can't make a bomb out of it, you can't make a nuclear reactor out of it, you can't make a chain reaction out of it. It has no harmful attributes whatsoever. But it does have this little bit of itty-bitty, tiny, harmless, stupid, everyday emitter that's irrelevant. And what the nuclear industry done was it conflated that with man-made stuff. And in increments over decades, it equated stupid, everyday, background, harmless stuff with man-made. And so they'll say, well, every day you're exposed to this much natural and this much man-made. So this much natural, they'll say, is more than the man-made. So therefore, the man-made is safe because you're already used to the natural stuff. It's a dirty, it's not illegal to do that, to tell those lies, by the way. It's not illegal for the nuclear industry to poison you with radiation. The list goes on and on. But if you go talk to the average person on this topic, they'll just roll their eyes at you. First off, they don't care about nuclear. They're conditioned to social engineering like Simpsons and SpongeBob and Superman and Spider-Man, etc., to disregard the effects of nuclear waste, for instance, right? So Spider-Man, of course, it wasn't for nuclear waste, Spider-Man wouldn't exist. It's crazy how social engineering is so effective, but it's very effective. Okay. Japan to announce Fukushima water released into the sea soon, April 10th, 2021. April 10th, 2021. Stored in around 1,000 tanks at Fukushima. So, as I showed you, in 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2021, they had 1,000 tanks. 2022, they had 1,000 tanks. 2023, they had 1,000 tanks. Mari Yamaguchi, International Atomic Energy Agency, and team is in Japan for final review. Well, this is 2023, this story. There's some of your tanks. Now, we've counted the tanks, right? And the most, if you count all those small ones, the most I can come up with is 750. I have about 1,000 pictures of this site and the tanks. Japan sought the International Degenerate Agency in ensuring the release meets international safety standards and to gain the understanding of other countries. Release should be delayed, some scientists say. Water used to cool the reactor cores, so in about 1,000 tanks. This is 2023. So it's still 1,000 tanks, right? So 1,000 tanks 10 years later. In 2013 was 1,000 tanks. In 2023 it's 1,000 tanks. So it's 1,000 tanks. It's interesting they knew they had to build exactly 1,000 tanks. And the amount that they were putting in the tanks allegedly every day, they said, long before they had any filtration, they were saying they were filtering the water, half of it was going in the tanks, the other tanks was going into the reactors to cool the melter reactors. Which was it's a brilliant idea, but the total number, the amount of water they used on multiple 19-story buildings, 4 19-story buildings, 190-foot, 65-meter buildings, that had nuclear meltdowns of all things that could burn at, and did, at around 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, that they took a garden hose and split it 4 ways. In each quarter of the garden hose, a 3 8-inch garden hose, was used to spray on each reactor building. It's like a bird peeing on the building all day. Like a little bird. That's the equivalent of the water we're talking about. You're talking about 120 tons a day. So let's say that's true though. So they took a garden hose, split it 4 ways. So each hose it's half the size of my pinky. And that's what they're spraying on nuclear meltdowns a day. And that's going down into the reactor. And they have wells all over the site where they drilled hole down in the site. And then the hole is like, like a well, where you drill a hole and the water comes up the well. That's what we're talking about. And then they pumped the water up from there. And that water was supposed to be just for samples to see how much radiation was in a sample. And then the sample is put into the tanks. That was the original idea of drilling the holes. But what they're claiming they're doing is retrieving all of the 120 tons a day and from these wells around the site and somehow magically getting that into the tank. And the water we're talking about is multiple sieverts per liter. 3 sieverts being in proximity to it is considered a lethal dose after about 10 minutes. Water above 1 sievert per hour. So there was a lot of connotations that this simply was dishonest. Everything they were telling us was dishonest. But there's more to that story. We're going to touch on that very quick. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the Pacific Ocean. Well, no, the whole country is radioactive. The radioactive fallout, massive fuel particulates covering the whole country, splitting atoms. A lot of it's still splitting atoms all around the country. And so all the leaves, all the pollen, everything else is getting radioactive. And when you have the big monsoons or typhoons down there, I can't even remember tonight. I think it's typhoons they have down there actually. Then you're washing a huge amount of radiation across the country, this huge country, out into the Pacific Ocean. And so if you got radioactive material and the leaf becomes radioactive, wherever that leaf blows to and lands next to other leaves, it will make them slightly radioactive too. And it's slightly still terrible for all the species, by the way. And there's this bizarre thing that happens with radiation. So if I take a magnet, which is totally different, right? It's harmless. But I put the magnet in a container with 1,000 nuts and bolts and stainless steel screws. The majority of them becomes magnetized. And if I just take a normal piece of metal and stick it in there, they'll start sticking. A lot of them will stick to the metal, right? Because they're magnetized. But radiation has the same thing, but radiation is not harmless like magnets. So radiation will make other things. So if a tabletop is radioactive, everything you lay on that tabletop becomes slightly radioactive, and that radiation can be transferred to other things because of the kind of emitters that we're talking about. So it's a really terrible technology, right? It's a really frightening technology. And so this cycle will go on for millions of years, not 1,000 years. Okay. So there's another facet to the story. And the ELP system we're going to talk about for a few minutes. Then we'll get back into the cycle that I put together. I'm working hard to reclaim my life right now and to make sure I don't go away, to make sure we don't stop. And anybody who knows me for a long time knows how ridiculously committed I am to these things, right? To me, this is not, I don't have a shadow of a doubt of how much trouble we're in. I'm able to articulate it with the documentation, unfortunately. It's fortunate for you because you get a good education. It's unfortunate for me because I can't deny the horror of what we're dealing with. And now we got all the whales that are emaciated. Pretty soon nobody will be able to deny it. And you just can't keep screeching climate change, the garbage can diagnosis. That's not going to, that which is radioactive fallout. Radioactive fallout is climate change. The one thing I like about my studio is it's really good to see my glasses when I want to clean them. The one thing I hate about my studio is I can see how bad my glasses are. You learn to ignore it, don't you? Sometimes. But for me, because I'm reading so much, and I apologize, I know I do this sometimes to people. It must have been. You can't see it though unless you use the light. I'm gonna have to use the spray. Imagine paying $8 for a couple of bottles of soapy water. That's what you're doing. In the hope that it makes this process tolerable, right? Because it's got to be one of the hardest jobs out there is keeping your glasses clean. If I look at my glasses, they get dirty. That's okay, we'll take a little break here for a second. The next part is really good stuff for you, everybody. I think I'm just still in shock of what they done to me, right? I'm still dealing with because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't have a safety net. There was no way I could have a safety net because we're trying to do research, and now we're not going to get no research done this year. We don't have any big foundations, unfortunately, and we most likely are not going to. That on its own is just the future generation. Let me tell you something. The future generation will not forget that the people that were trying to do good things for this planet were denied the ability by the industry. That's going to be an extra black mark for the industry. And you can't blame them for defunding me, because I'm actually pretty good with a small amount of funding. I can do pretty amazing stuff. We have a pretty big operation put together that allows us to do that. I was always very conscious that this could happen to me. And so I invested into this operation nonstop for the last 14 years. So we have a real operation. And with just a little bit of help, you'd be surprised what we can accomplish. You'd be surprised what I can accomplish with nothing. So, with very little, right? Okay, here we go again. So the Arriva's water filtration system was the exact same as the Alps system. This was the French system. They went bankrupt, right? In France. They're from France. To abandon the TEPCO, to abandon the 2014, the Arriva system amid contaminated water crisis. For the last 3 years, the system had been unused and kept out of operation. So it was never used, the Arriva system, which is the exact same as the Alps system, because you can't use it, see? The Alps system, which is this story, TEPCO unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima, 2014. The advanced liquid processing system, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. Shinzo Abe, who thank goodness is not with us anymore, to help handle the issue with the contaminated water, threw another $500 million at it, including pumping groundwater up before it reaches the site, installing an ice wall to redirect waters that pass on its way to the Pacific Ocean. And we'll talk about those two coming up. So the Arriva system didn't work at all. It didn't function reliably at all. It didn't work, period. 2014. In fact, 2014, as I showed you earlier, it wasn't even completed. In August 2014, I showed you that earlier, the system, they were hoping to have an operational later at the end of the year or early next year. And that's when it was, I think it was late 2015 when they finally allegedly said they had it finished. You can't use it because the water is so radioactive, you can't change the filter. And the filters are not like a normal filter. So when you think of like a car filter or your typical water filter in your house, because that's what they're trying to invoke with you. With nuclear, it's the equivalent of taking an oil filter from an old car, say that had an oil filter for 10 years and you never changed it. Taking that filter and putting it in your drinking water filter. And so imagine what the water's going to be like that's coming through. It's going to be brutal, right? You can't drink it. And it's the same thing for the nuclear type filters. After about 20 minutes, that filter has thousands and thousands of sieverts. So say you're putting in 2.2 sieverts per liter, after an hour or two, it's thousands of sieverts in the filter. So now any water that's coming through at 2.2 sieverts per liter of just beta that they acknowledge, when it comes out the other side, it's going to be 10 or 15 sieverts. It's going to be worse. It can't work, and that's why the Areva system wasn't used. They basically acknowledged it. But that, you know, the idea is to hoodwink humanity and pretend that they had this under control, pretend that they had ways of mitigating, pretend that this could work, and that's what they done. TEPCO, the utility which operates the Fukushima Daiichi plant, promised to treat all contaminated water by March 2015, but the ELP system, which is incapable of doing the job anyway, and any part of the job at all, wasn't even finished until 2015. The goal it is now emitting will never be realized. There are certain parts of the site we don't have full control. And what they mean by that statement is that these are lethal zones, that when the homeless walk in there, they die. Their organs melt and they die. Okay. So TEPCO says a groundwater 2014 bypass operation not having effects at Fukushima. So water that's coming down the mountainside, because it's running gravity towards the Pacific Ocean, they wanted to block it and then pump it directly into the ocean so it didn't run through the site and contribute to more radiation that they can't contain going into the Pacific Ocean. They can't contain anything from going into the Pacific Ocean. If you store it in tanks, you're going to have to abandon the site. You can't do it. It doesn't work. But the population has no concept, is not able to rationalize these details, these important details. TEPCO officials admit that groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce the tons of water from entering the crippled reactor buildings at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. TEPCO says they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation will have any tangible effect on the groundwater. When, if ever, 2014. If ever, and that was the right response, if ever. In June, TEPCO was also forced to admit that its ice wall was also intended to control groundwater flow, was also unsuccessful. And the ice wall, I'm going to talk about in a moment, TEPCO failed to deliver and promised to install a fence. So they also, these are many different things they said they were going to do, but they couldn't do. But they said, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to stop it from getting into the... Each of these were meant to reassure the world that they were going to stop it from getting into the Pacific Ocean. That's why the 1,000 tanks exist, that's why the ice walls, that's why the fences, that's why this, that's why that. And because none of this could work, but people didn't know that. They bought into that. Oh, well, TEPCO got an ice wall, Dana. TEPCO's got to build a fence, Dana. And I said, I know, but it doesn't work that way. And I'm not going to waste my time trying to explain that to the individual, right? You're just banging your head against the wall, and you might end up losing a friend over something that could be avoided. Why do it? TEPCO failed to deliver on the promise to install a fence to restrict the contaminated water. And using the word leaking is insane. It's insane. And when you look at this big shot of the site, does that look like 1,000 tanks to you? It's a terrible industry. At the time, TEPCO asked the government not to announce that they had committed to constructing the fences. They asked the government, this is a corporation, telling the government not to announce they had committed to constructing the fence, as the utility was concerned with the $1 billion construction cost would increase its debt, and then people would sell the shares, right? The government agreed not to publicize the arrangement, but then TEPCO did not undertake the work they promised to complete. Well, they spent $48 billion picking up one-ton bags. What was the big deal in another billion? Right? It would give confidence to the investors, not the opposite, say. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations, June the 17th, 2014. So remember, the ELP system in 2014 didn't exist. None of these so-called mitigating machines, these mitigating attempts worked. The officials announced today they have found that the ice wall plans are not progressing. Now, they've never built a wall that big before, never even attempted to come close to a wall that big before, to freeze it. Why not build a real wall? Why would you build an ice wall? Because the taxpayers would pay for it, because it's an experiment. And in order to keep an ice wall functional, you got to spend an enormous amount every year. And it's so complicated, it's never been done before. Why undertake something like that when you could have built a new wall, see? And they hired 260,000 people, I'll show you coming up, to help build an ice wall, he said. But if you paid everybody $1,100, you had no money left over for an ice wall or administration, because that would have used up all the money. We have yet to form the ice stopper because we can't make the temperature low enough to freeze water. Typical amidst the ice wall will not stop groundwater from entering the crippled, and calling destroyed nuclear meltdowns crippled is just, it's unconscionable. Crippled Fukushima Daiichi reactor buildings. So that's the so-called ice wall. They allegedly 260,000 people allegedly worked on the ice wall. New map of the iodine. So the Americans had flown their special planes 1,000 feet above the ground. And the type of iodine has a half-life of only 8 days, an extremely short period, makes it impossible to determine how much was leaked and how far the material. So you can't call these emissions leaked. When you're talking about 3 million atoms per square meter, that's not a leak, that's a catastrophic event. And you can't just have iodine-131. If you got that, you're going to have similar numbers in very longevity isotopes like neptunium, plutonium, uranium, etc. 20 kilometers away was 3 million atoms per square meter. These are brutal numbers we're talking about. But the reality of it was, in North America and Canada, a study out of Ottawa, Canada, of iodine-129, here in Canada, United States, was at 220 million atoms. Not 3 million atoms, but 220 million atoms per liter. That's got a 15 million year half-life, not an 8-day half-life. And so you had a gigantic plume cover the whole planet, and that's why we have all the mass species die-offs. Water above 1 sievert per hour. EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse. Almost everything is out of control. France says Japan has lost control and the French will leave the country. The Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. Tokyo has lost almost all control of events at Fukushima, energy official. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. The ambassador said this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe for the world and the planet. Think about that statement. Why would they invoke such an apocalyptic connotation, right? Well, this model is based on 23 days of the French, not model, but a study of 23 days of radioactive fallout, airborne, of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And what that means is it's 1 million to 10 million atoms of pre-Fukushima levels. So it could have been 30 to 40 million atoms of cesium-137 with a 300-year lifespan, 30-year half-lives, very energetic, and it pulses energy every second for 600 feet. So you had an invisible snowstorm. It never stopped snowing, radiation. So, and that's the best way to look at it. Because if you had a snowstorm covering the whole planet at 23 days, you would get everything I'm saying right away. You would like, yeah, Dana's right. That's crazy, right? It's never going to stop snow. Oh my God, how are we ever going to deal with this? But because you can't see it or perceive it, or smell it, or taste it, or touch it, or hear it, or feel it, then maybe Dana's wrong, right? Or maybe Dana's stupid, or maybe Dana's just a fearmonger. It's easy, right? And there's a lot of public relation firms out there demonizing me. There's a lot. They're really good at it too, and they have an unlimited budget, so they're very effective at it. And I know that was going to happen. I had no illusions that my life would be destroyed, and I wasn't wrong. They surpassed anything I expected. So 23 days, you have an invisible snowstorm, and think of instead of an ice flake, it's a radioactive atom, and each atom is pulsing energy at speed of light every second. This is just absurdness. And that if you're within that 600 feet, it's going to wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, whether you're an insect or an elephant or a whale. It's going to wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells every second. Your body has to repair it every second. It does that with white blood cells. But it can't keep up with that. Because you're talking about your whole body X-rays. You're getting blasted with gamma shines, neutron bombardment, beta rays, and alpha shine, and X-rays. This is insanity. And the industry, you didn't need a nuclear meltdown for this to play out. You just needed fuel pools, and there's 1,000 fuel pools full of used reactor cores splitting atoms directly into the environment. It's the worst case scenario for any planet. Never break the gamma chain. Officials unsure what to do next. South Korea called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. I don't think North Korea didn't get brutalized either, by the way. South Korea got brutalized, and this current administration refuses to acknowledge that it happened, despite the fact that it's well documented by the administration from 2011, 12, 13, and 14. So I counted 7, and now I was being generous. I was being very liberal when I suggested there's 750 tanks at the site. And let me just show you what I mean by that. Well, it's not a very high quality, it's not a bad quality picture. Let me see, maybe I can just zoom in for you. Make it easier, I don't have to move myself around, I can move the picture around. Hang on here. So you see these tanks, they're big tanks, right? They're pretty big. They're big tanks. They're pretty big tanks. But on the back here is small tanks, right? See those small tanks right there? And then over here is small tanks right there. And up here is small tanks too. So if I include all those small tanks, the most I came up with was 750 tanks. These tanks are empty. You're not going to put highly radioactive sludge in these tanks because that'll burn a hole through the bottom of it, right? Here's where it all went, straight out into the ocean. And the radioactive fallout covered the whole planet. Nuclear Jamaica, that's a great song. That's one of James's songs. In fact, let's play that song. I gotta clean my sinuses. We got major forest fires all around me, by the way. Major. I got pictures that'll blow your mind of, like, we got multiple communities evacuated. Communities. And we got forest fires. Like if the community the pictures I've seen this morning, if that was a community at the end of that forest fire, people would have had to jump off 300-foot cliffs to get away from it. Fortunately, people were evacuated. I don't think it burnt down the communities. But I'm telling you right now that we've had more forest fires here by May than we have in any other time in history, any other year. And that was only May. So we're probably double the previous record of forest fires in this place. And it's summer's, because we get summer late, right? We don't get summer till July. So it's still summer here. The mornings are cold, the nights are cold, mind you. It's 12 degrees out there right now or something. Cesium. It was boiling hot. I got to get up on that island and see if there's any bird carcasses tomorrow. This song is called Nuclear Jamaica. I'm going to play that song, some of it for sure. I got to go clean my sinuses. I'll be right back. It won't take long. It's a great song. You can find it at James Luce's site on YouTube, Nuclear Jamaica.
Jah guide us, Jah protect us in this land so free. From mountains high to ocean deep, we stand in unity. The mountains sing with the morning sun. The The rivers flow, their work never done. But now they bring machines with fire untamed to scorch our land and leave it chained. Oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, the waters, the skies. Jamaica will stand, our love never dies. Oh, oh, our love never dies. They promise light, but chaos hides. The atom's price pulls the ocean's tides. From Kingston town to Montego Bay, Jamaica's soul will not decay. Oh, oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, the waters, the sky. Jamaica will stand, our love never dies. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh. The blue mountains whisper, the ocean pleads. Protect us now from these reckless deeds. No more false prophets, no fleeting gains. We fight for love, not the atom's chains. Not the atom's chains. Oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, the waters, the skies. Jamaica will stand, our love never dies. Oh, Jamaica, we rise, we stand, we'll fight. Through God's love, we'll defend what's right. Nuclear, not here, not today. Jamaica's love will light the way.
Nuclear Jamaica. Which I really love that song too. Okay, here we go again. Whew. All right. Is Fukushima 4 reactor fuel pools? We haven't done the poll yet tonight. Is Fukushima 4 reactor fuel pools? 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. There are 2 fuel pools at the top of the 8 buildings. Meltdown emissions to catalysts beyond the extinction level event worldwide. That's why I haven't got many people on my show, because I get censored when I ask those types of questions, right? And is that the first time I showed the poll tonight? I think it is it? Yeah, I'm definitely off my game, but I'm getting back. With me, I think the best thing can happen to me is I'm doing a show 5 days a week, right? Just to keep myself focused. That, to me, is the most important thing that I can contribute, is come out and have this conversation. It's very difficult, by the way. I don't know how many people realize how difficult it is to do a 2-hour show. A 1-hour show is a piece of cake. I could do that 7 days a week, wouldn't bother me at all. But in order to do a 7-hour show, a 2-hour show, that's a commitment. It's very difficult. And so you got to keep the momentum going. Hidden Noah, which is the American government, animation shows ocean all along the United States west coast was contaminated with Fukushima cesium. You can't just have cesium. How can you just have cesium? By the end of March 2011. So this model was suppressed. This model was the 9th of April. What you're looking at was the 9th of April. And they're acknowledging cesium-137. But the idea, because the French government had come out with a model at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air of what it would have been pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137, NOAA had to come out and try to downplay it. That's what you're looking at right there. So France's model was the airborne plume. This is the ocean plume. So that's actually two different plumes. And living in denial is not an option, unfortunately. I wish it was. That'd be fun. Hearing wraps up. Congress must act to advance nuclear energy. Nuclear is about 800 times safer than coal and 100 times safer than gas. This is the strangest thing you could ever say. But that's the only reason nuclear exists is because these politicians and these pundits and this pro-community will get out and tell these types of lies. Nuclear is the dirtiest industry we've ever come across. There's nothing more dirtier. And then the fuel pools, you can't contain the emissions, which are lethal to everything with replicating cells. So a reactor boils water for 1 million homes and businesses. After a year, 14 months, they're going to take a huge chunk of it out of the reactor and put it in a spot where there's no containment, which is underwater, and it's going to boil off 120,000 liters a day because of splitting atoms. The atoms are absorbed into the water boils off. The atoms, each liter's got trillions of anthropogenic man-made harmful atoms. Each atom, a single atom could invoke a autoimmune trigger in your body that eventually turns into a cancer, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Because we're talking about, and they're all surrounded by farms. So when you start accumulating radiation, one of the ways you accumulate it, by the way, is through farms. And so you're getting a whole host. You're not just getting cesium or iodines, for instance. You're getting everything. A single meal might have 1,000 different types of isotopes into it. And your body can expel some of it. But your body is 50 times less efficient than an animal's kidneys are at expelling this stuff. And this stuff, like the plutonium killed all the dogs and all the experiments from Loveless Respiratory Research. It's an interesting name, Loveless, L-E-S-S, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, which is a government-funded institute with the U.S. Navy. And all the dogs will die of multiple tumors just from a single isotope, like plutonium, which is named after the devil appropriately. Nobody has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So these Mr. Schmitz, if that's his real name, will come out and tell you lies after lies after lies. Mr. Schmidt, indeed. There's little need for containment structures in some of these new designs. There's little need for containment at a nuclear disease factory. Oh, okay, that makes me feel better. 3 Mile Island was the problem, they said, because fear-mongering is what they're saying. This, by the way, was a plume from 3 Mile Island. And there was cancer plumes similar to this, where, like when the people who ran away from 3 Mile Island, after they were allowed to run away, Dick Thornburg, who was only the governor for about 70 days, who knew nothing about nuclear, wouldn't let them evacuate. But then scientists said, well, if you leave the pregnant women and children there and they start dying in mass over the next year or so, you're going to ruin the nuclear industry. So you're going to have to suggest that it's okay for them, make them feel better if they leave for a couple of days. And people left their doors open, which meant their house was unbelievably contaminated, by the way. And when he came back, they left their pets there. When he came back, a lot of their pets were blind or dead. Because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, Dana. Yeah, well, I knew that. And clearly that's what's going on. The nuke plant leak was plugged. Radiation found 60 miles away. Nuclear plant leak plugged. Of course, this is the furthest thing from the truth. That was one of the headlines from 3 Mile Island. I don't know when I made this picture. I think I made this picture in 2013. So the Hulk is because he is immune to nuclear waste created, and Spider-Man was created by nuclear waste, right? And so the kids will grow up thinking nuclear waste will turn them into superheroes, because that's what their version of a superhero is. Not their uncle or their brothers or their parents or their grandparents, but some fictional character created by or co-opted by the nuclear industry. We need to stop demonizing nuclear like the Simpsons did. So Homer Simpson, at the beginning of every Simpson show, you see Homer Simpson, he's at work, he's got these tongs, and he's picking up a fuel rod. That's never going to happen in real life, because that's instant death to whoever does it. And then the siren goes off, it's time to go home, he shifts over, so he just chunks it. The fuel rod bounces around, which is glowing green, bounces around, and lands in his hoodie. And he gets in his car, he reaches, he can't find it, what the hell, he don't care. This is all indoctrination. He gets in his car, he's driving home, eventually he reaches up and he sees it and he throws it out the window. You can't pick up a fuel rod. You can't have it in the hoodie in the back of your head. These are lethal doses immediately. They melt your organs, right? Once your organs start melting after a few moments, you can throw the fuel rod away per se, as if that's even conceivable. By the way, it'll catch fire if it's exposed to oxygen. And your organs will continue to melt and you'll die that day or within a few days. Simpsons didn't demonize. The idea of Simpsons, and what they meant by that was the public shouldn't have any exposure to nuclear material, like through cartoons or Hollywood or anything else, because they want to control the narrative, and they can't control the narrative when somebody's making fun, see? This industry is deadly serious, and the word deadly is the key. The prospects for $1 billion plus small modular reactor and fusion nuclear project. So why would you, their small reactors in Canada are going to be 240-story or 24-story, 240-foot buildings. Half the building will be underground. Has anybody out there ever been in a 12-story building underground before? The whole story is crazy, but they're calling it a small modular reactor. Leave it to Canada, poor Canada. But why wouldn't you use geothermal? There's all kinds of storage solutions now. So you can buy windmills. All you do is compress air. You can dig mine shafts, and you just compress air into the mine shafts. And then the heat can be that you create by compressing the air. Because as a commercial diver, I have a big vat on my ships, and I would put all my tanks in that when I'm compressing air into it, right? And that absorbs the heat. And so you can take the heat and save it in sand, because you can heat sand at 700 degrees, or you can just get lava, endless amount, whatever supply of lava rocks you want from Iceland and places like that, for next to nothing, by the way. And you can store at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures in that for a couple of months at a time. And you can use it over and over and over for thousands of years. It doesn't denigrate at all. So when you're compressing air into mine shafts, when you're unpacking that air to turn a turbine, you can expand the air instead of you can burn gas or oil or coal to help it expand quicker, and you don't need very much. But you can salvage the heat you use to compress it, when you compress it rather, and then use that heat to unpack it to make it expand when you're ready to use it. It's very efficient. It's like 80, 85, 90% efficient. And geothermal, you can get 400 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, but you need around 600 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So we're not there yet, right? But we are. We're at 400 degrees for geothermal. You're there. So instead of having to use 1,000 gallons a day of oil, say, right, to power a community, you only got to use 200 gallons. because you have geothermals already at 400 degrees. You just need to bump it up to 600 degrees. You don't have to go from 0 to 600 to boil water to turn to turbines. You just got to go now 200 degrees. And if you put the academic community, the weight of the academic community behind innovating that, you don't have to do it for 3 or 4 weeks, and you would come up with a solution from that. Geothermal can power the whole planet. It's everywhere. You can drill, no matter where you are. If you drill deep enough, you're going to hit the temperatures you need, no matter where you do. And they say, oh, well, there's only so many places you can do it. That's just meant to keep you from considering geothermals as a solution. It's a perfect solution. And a megawatt, 1,000 homes, can be powered for the system you're looking at is around $5 million to build it, which is nothing compared to any other technology. It really isn't. But you're talking about doing it the expensive way because we refuse to invest. But we're going to spend $1 billion on this small reactor and fusion project. There's 100 small modular reactor companies and over 100 fusion companies, and they all need $1 billion. None of them are going to come to fruition. All of them have been at it for 50 years. If you took that manpower, that brain power, that monetary, and applied it to geothermal, you would resolve any issues you got. And you could get rid of gas, oil, coal, nuclear, and everything else, and truly have an emission-free, it was 660 gigawatts. Some media describes it as 666 gigawatts of solar power came online in 12 months last year, which is close to double the entire inventory of 80 years of the nuclear industry. In just 12 months, solar power. They expect by 2026 for renewables to surpass gas, oil, and coal worldwide energy totals. But here in Canada, we had Ontario, Canada 2 years ago, when they were promoting nuclear, closed down 740 wind and solar farms. There was $5 billion set aside to distribute to the 740 solar and wind farms so they can produce storage. So they would truly around the clock, wind, no sun, they would still have power. And they would have peak power too. They closed those projects down. They took the $5 billion and gave it to Bruce Power Plant, and they're going to make storage for their nuclear plant. Not that they need storage for energy. They're a nuclear plant, right? So they scuttled the renewable industry here in Canada. A thriving one at that. And Doug Ford now is throwing money at the nuclear industry and claiming that the small modular reactors are going to be revolutionary when they're actually 50 feet taller than Fukushima's reactors. Hi, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hope you're doing good. Gee, John Shiflett retracted a lot of messages. Something happened. It must have been an accident with his keyboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Damn keyboards. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, something's going on with his keyboards, I guess. Yeah, it's unconscionable that we only have 16 people on our show. We only have 21 likes. We have 28 votes. I guess reality is not an option, right? Unless you're willing to live in a fantasy, then you're not allowed to exist. A company founded by Bill Gates' terrorist power is more like it. And Bill Gates, his youngest daughter, said he actually has Asperger's disease. He's like autistic, eh? Which makes sense. A rendering of the natrium reactors. We've seen the rendering of the small modular reactors in Canada. They're like a ice cream bucket upside down, a half of an ice cream bucket upside down, like a 1 or 2 story buildings. But in reality, they're actually 24-story buildings. That this is supposed to be the molten salt storage they're going to be using with this too. So take the most toxic and noxic technologies, pretend that it's clean, and pay the media to regurgitate that narrative. When instead of coming up with these contraptions, they could already have, for the same prices, 5 times more energy with geothermal. Why would you use anything but geothermal? What is the point? Why even consider anything? Why look at wind? Why look at solar when you can have geothermal? Like, you can have wind and solar because it works as backup, so-called. Like, not backup, but for peak power, to supplement peak power, to store energy. So geothermal is 24/7, and there's no hitches for 50 or 60 years. You build a new geothermal plant right alongside of it. 50 years later, you switch that on, turn off the old one, and then recycle everything and build another one. It's brilliant, right? And so for the same amount of money that they're wasting trying to develop and coming up with this and make it actually work, and they got to use 1 million corporations to get the parts they need, it's the stupidest industry conceivable. And then in order to even get the extra bit of power out of these so-called small modular reactors, they have to use a very high assay, a very high grade, or plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is reclaiming a very terrible, it's a terrible technology because you have to contaminate the entire planet to make the fuel. It's the craziest ideology conceivable, and the media is able to manipulate the vulnerable of society that is gullible enough to watch their diarrhea. Ontario $1 billion small modular reactor investment. Ontario, Canada, we were just talking about it. They closed all the solar and wind farms, 740 of them down, so that they can promote the dirtiest technology in human history on the 3rd biggest aquifer on the planet, the Great Lakes. That's the 3rd biggest freshwater aquifer on the planet, and it's surrounded. It's utterly surrounded. So this is the Great Lakes, and everything you're looking at is nuclear plants, nuclear dumps, nuclear fuel processing facilities. On the Great Lakes, what do you think they're up to? If that's not trying to contaminate the 3rd biggest aquifer on the planet, what actually is? It's unconscionable that they've done that, and that they're doing it, and that now they have destroyed that ecosystem. And $1 billion for this, $1 billion for that. We got nothing for geothermal, nothing for renewables. $1 billion for anything nuclear. Everything nuclear can have whatever it wants. It'll never come to fruition. Governor taps the Tennessee nuclear network to lead the nation in nuclear innovation. Governor taps Tennessee. So innovation, the Tennessee nuclear network to lead the nation in nuclear innovation. Well, how about a geothermal innovation? If just one of the states or one of the provinces in Canada or any other country uses the same energy and commitment and monetary and academic, they're going to blow all the other states or provinces away with the results, with geothermal. And blow everybody's mind. Everybody's going to regret nuclear existed. They're going to be jealous of the geothermal state or province, right? That's the reality. But see, and what they're saying is, when they talk about innovation and stuff like this, to lead the nation in nuclear innovation, this technology, again, they're acknowledging technology doesn't exist, or have to develop it, which when it comes to nuclear, means they're a very long way away from fruition. and that the taxpayers are paying for everything. The taxpayers have already paid to replace all the electricity. They paid, right? They pay for the electricity with their monthly bills, and a chunk of that goes to replacing the facilities. And they steal the money, right? These organizations, these pro-nuclear communities will steal the money to try to develop that technology. And they've been doing this for about 70 years. And it's the same abusive cycle for every species and everybody on the planet and the countries that are participating in it. Technology that's not supposed to exist. It's the worst. It's a technology where the emissions cause an injury to everything with replicating cells. It's a permanent injury. And so what I do, I think, with these shows is I reinforce over and over and over the facts, the facts, right? Just the facts. And I'm very blunt, unfortunately, because that's called for. Describing this technology and its brutal attributes that is destroying the biodiversity now permanently, forever. Oak Ridge-based ETEC Nuclear Working Group designated as the Tennessee Nuclear Network. So they have an enormous amount of resources. They have the universities at their fingertips. They have the funding at their fingertips. They have all the best equipment at their fingertips to develop a technology. There's hundreds of these companies. None of them can crack the code. And most of them are not even trying. They're just there to rake in money from unsuspecting investors and free money from the taxpayers that have no say in that, right? It's meant to divert away from solutions. It's done on purpose. Daniel Desau's High-Tech Growth Report. Why Oak Ridge National Laboratory, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and the University of Tennessee's are powering TRIO, which is another nuclear startup hopeful, right? So we see this so many times. It's just, what about solutions like geothermal? Why isn't that part of the equation? ETEC's annual Nuclear Opportunity Workshop now. It's called NOW, N-O-W. And they steal all these acronyms. And this is, I think, one of the state senators or governors right there. And he's promoting this technology because the industry funded him, right? And he gets a free new jacket out of it and a free new vest and gets a shiny badge and the media takes his picture and he's got to look, he feels important. Look at the Japanese guy there. Little vultures in the background. The racist, bigoted, prejudiced vultures in the background. Yeah, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee Center leans against a railing as he listens during a business trip to, is that Orano? Which is a French facility, by the way. In France. And Orano USA, which used to be Areva went bankrupt, got rid of their obligations to deal with nuclear waste for 1 million years, kept their facilities, kept their employees, kept their phone numbers, kept their fleet of vehicles, and ships and private jets, and changed the name to Orano, which is the French government, by the way. Is planning a uranium enrichment facility, disease factory in Oak Ridge, which is already a disease factory. Oak Ridge has created so many crimes against humanity. It's built on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country that feeds around 25,000 farms with radioactive water. It was contaminated in the 50s and 60s, and they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to mitigate that. East Tennessee Economic Council Nuclear Working Group. And they all have the biggest budgets you could ever dream if you were if this was geothermal, the problem would be solved. If these same corporations with the monetary, the budgets they got, the people that they got, the access to technology and institutions that they got, we would solve any geothermal issues we have. But we actually already solved the geothermal issues. Let me see here. Just keep it rolling. We're getting there. Wow, we've been going 145. Let's roll her to the 2-hour mark. The East Tennessee Economic Council's Nuclear Working Group was organized in 2007. It's currently comprised of 93 experts and 50 organizations. So they have an enormous amount of oomph behind them. But all you do is 90% of the money is stolen through administration. They never come up with solutions. And it's not illegal to be the criminals that they are, right? That's not illegal to commit the crimes they're committing. Allegedly, nuclear is not able to commit a crime because it's not illegal to poison us with radiation. Congress and parliaments and diets don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission does. The network will work closely with private industry, key stakeholders like states, the Oak Ridge Corridor Development Corporation, the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce, the Ronan Alliance, the Oak Ridge Chambers of Commerce, Oak Ridge National Laboratories, the White 12 National Security Complex, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the University of Tennessee, the Tennessee Board of Regents, the Oak Ridge Associated Universities, United Cleanup Oak Ridge to leverage their combined expertise in all things nuclear. Imagine taking this monolithic conglomerate of organizations and institutions, and shakers and movers, and put them to work on solving the last 2 kilometers of geothermal. Problem solved, right? But then you don't need nuclear no more. And the nuclear industry is never going to allow that to happen. So they have scuttled everybody's future and poisoned everybody's future. But that's not just all of them. There's even more. The Oak Ridge is a cornerstone for the nuclear advancement globally. And there is no nuclear renaissance. You got the same gigawatts today as you had in the early 90s. Hosting projects such as TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority's Clinch River Small Modular Reactor Project. The CAROs, these are small modular reactors. Power Hermes Demonstration Reactor Project. Orano's U.S. projects, IKE, Uranium Enrichment Facility. TRISO, Fuel Fabrication Facility. Type 1 Energy, Fusion Energy Projects, among many, 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 many others. So you have all these massive shakers and movers just dedicated to this one, and they're never going to conquer it. And if you took the same energy, the same monetary, the same organizations, putting to work on coming up with a quicker, replicatable system for doing geothermal, which is stupid, easily to do. It's mindlessly easy. So there's one company with geothermal. So I'll explain 2 companies that makes these, all of that together look like idiots. There's Quatsi Electric, and what they're doing, they're just going to melt, they're going to drill down to as far as they can drill with the conventional systems that we mastered, right, through oil and coal, oil and gas wells, and then use like a directed type energy weapon. It's not a directed energy weapon, it's like a directed energy type weapon that'll melt the rocks and get down the extra couple of kilometers. And they can power the whole world with that technology, and they're it. But there's another company that is going to drill down 6 times quicker than any conventional drill can drill today. And they're going to do it by using 25,000 pounds per square inch water jets, which is 50-year-old obsolete technology. 25,000 pounds per square inch water jets will slice up the rocks, the hard rocks. And then they have pneumatic hammers, water-driven hammers, that will pound those sliced up rocks into rubble. The water that's being ejected now will be vacuumed up the same line, and then there's a drill pit will go down and widen out the hole. It'll be 6 times quicker than any gas or coal or oil drilling system on the planet. And if you mass produce that technology, it wouldn't take long for the whole planet to convert over. And then you can use the existing facilities instead of the consumables like gas, oil, and coal and nuclear. You can just plug in the geothermal. So you can still keep the traditional telephone poles, the whole infrastructure. Instead of using, gas, oil, and coal and nuclear to power it, you use geothermal. Right? But when you got all these well-positioned, well-placed, institutionally driven, monetary enhanced from the taxpayers, and they're controlling all the universities, they're controlling all of the supply chains and everything else. And they're just going to bar out everything, because everything is a competition to them. And this nuclear industry in 80 years have slowly crept and taken over your major universities and your medias worldwide and the key positions in your government. And you can't have a future with the nuclear industry on your planet. You probably can't have a future because of what they've already done. In addition, the network will continue hosting the Nuclear Opportunity Workshop for thousands of years and bringing 1,000+ attendees from 34 states to the region every year to learn about the Tennessee nuclear assets and growth opportunities. So they're in a position to snuff out any competition, and that's what they intend to do. That is the only thing you can expect them that they will do. That's the only way they can survive, is if they snuff out any opposition whatsoever. And that is what their focus, lasered focus on stopping any kind of dissenting voices like me. 16 views on my show tonight. I know it's a terrible show, it's a boring show, it's a hateful show, a horrible show. I'm a scumbag. I've heard it all for so long. But in reality, I'm actually a really good person. I'm actually a really nice person. I'm actually a really caring person. And I'm fairly smart too. And I know that running an educational program eventually will be a big cog in the wheel of all of these crazies. I know that for a fact. And I know we've had major successes since we started doing this educational program. I know that there's a lot of policymakers, investors, in fact, every one of them, when they find this show, and they will, and they do, they might not be swayed because they're influenced by the industry and that's where the money's coming from. But all of a sudden, they got a real narrative they've never heard before, and slowly but surely, that plays a large part into holding back this industry. And the nuclear industry is not genuine anyway, right? It's not trying to come up with solutions. It's trying to keep everything from existing, and it's trying to poison us. And it's very successful. Conservation groups set to sue Trump administration over fast-tracked geothermal project. And so this is the industry. So the nuclear industry has wiped out the entire coastline of British Columbia, California, America's Pacific Ocean coastline, Alaska, and Canada's. Wiped it out. But the conservation groups, anything to the geothermal conservation groups will say, oh, you can't do that. There's a special frog there, and we're just going to sue you. They have endless money, and they're promoted by the industries. Note that there's no evidence of sensitive or classified information compromised in a breach. I don't know. I think I got that. That should probably be there. I don't think that's the wrong. Oh, I jumped. Here was the story. They're going to sue the geothermal administration. It got fast-tracked because they can produce a lot of energy. They got shut down because there's a frog there that doesn't exist anywhere else. And instead of coming up with a solution, they want it stopped. Casey invests up to $3.2 billion in Sizewell C nuclear plant in the United States. $3.2 billion. And Sizewell C is going to be like $70 billion US or Canadian. It's going to be around $58 billion US. It's not even started yet, which means it's probably going to hit around 90 billion before they finish it. UK gives the green light to $44 billion Sizewell C nuclear plant. This was 2 weeks ago. Saudi geothermal potential constrained by red tape. So you see that all the time. Saudi's constrained by red tape. Fast-track geothermal constrained by suing them. Right? They just, this is what the industry does. They have all kinds of groups meant to. Tennessee local government will forego sale taxes for the $4.5 billion nuclear facility. Not nuclear reactor, but nuclear facility. They just throw money at these objects. Don't worry about it. We got more. Geothermal is like, you scumbag, get out of here. So how are we supposed to have a future? In addition to the sales tax break, the company is receiving $6 million grant from the State Economic Community Development Department. If geothermal got $6 million, that would be a big story. I'm going to give you another $6 million. There's another $6 million on top of the $4.5 billion tax break. The radiation covers the whole planet. This was Neptunium-239, radioactive fallout based upon 20 days in your top left-hand corner, and 21 days behind me. It decays to plutonium-239 in just 2.5 days. So in 25 days, all of it's converted to plutonium. Plutonium has a 24,000-year half-life, a 240 million-year lifespan. And plutonium kills everything with replicating cells in the most horrific ways. And you'd have a plume covering the entire planet, so this is permanent. And this is just a fraction. This is only 20 days. Based on TEPCO's numbers that are completely refusing to acknowledge how much of the inventories were actually lost. Grey whale die-off feared as starving whales migrate north. Thousands of grey whales now migrating north from Baja, California, are in such poor shape. You can't have, there's 13,000, right? You can't have thousands of them emaciated, starving to death, and some thousands of other ones healthy in the same migratory route. They all eat the same food. The whales were already in poor shape last fall when they began their 12,000-mile migration to breeding. So since 2016, 52% of the grey whales have died of starvation. Last year, the 12,000-mile migration, they were emaciated. Now they're headed, that was south. This year they're headed north. And now they're showing up emaciated and dead everywhere from starvation. There was no surviving babies last year. They'll be gone in 2 years. They're not going to make it back south again, right? Is the reality. Some might, but within 2 years they'll be gone. And we're seeing the same thing with the humpback whales, the same thing with the sperm whales, the same thing with the covert beak whales, the same thing with killer whales, the same thing with fin whales, the same thing with what was the whale that got on? There was a whale trying to beach itself 2 days ago in New Jersey in shallow water, and all the boats ran over, and one boat got right on top of it where it was trying to go ashore. There wasn't enough water there for the whale and the boat. So the whale got stuck under the boat. This was an emaciated whale, just like a minke whale. And the last minke whale that died there looked like a deflated tire. It was so emaciated. They actually acknowledged that it was severe emaciation. Instead of being 10,000, 14,000 pounds, they get up to 20,000 pounds. This one was wasn't full grown, but it was close. But it maybe weighed 900 pounds when it should weigh 10,000, 12,000 pounds. And I got pictures for the next die-off video, which might be tomorrow night. The emaciation it's unbelievable of that minke whale. So they had another minke whale trying to run up roughly in the same place. And you can see pictures in some of the videos that it's emaciated. There's no illusions about it, and I have screen captures of it. it was trying to get, it was like in really shallow water, not enough water for the whale. And the boat ended up right where it's trying to go up because, tourists want to see the whales. And the whale never had enough room there. The boat got tipped to the side. Somebody fell over and they just stood up. Because it was only like waist deep. It wasn't, a little bit over like chest deep. So they got knocked over the boat, then they stood up and they were just touching the boat. They weren't swimming or something, they were stood up. And the media described the whale as attacking the boat. The whale wasn't attacking the boat, it was trying to beach itself because it was dying. And they got in the way. But that story's gone viral. Whale attacks boat in New Jersey. I think it's New Jersey. There's so much of it. I cover so much of it, and because I'm getting another die-off show ready over the last week. Since the last show on Thursday, which was a 3-hour show, right? It was a crazy show of die-offs. It was insane, of emaciated whales and everything else. And the birds we got in recent die-off of seabirds in Australia are emaciated. Australia has everything beyond a paywall, right? So I got to research that to find somebody else telling the story, so I can cover that story. But that's 2 different die-offs now I got from Australia of emaciated birds. They have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae visible from the shore. The whales we're seeing are extremely emaciated. They have bulging ribs and shoulder blades. You can count their vertebrae even from the shoreline. This is absurdness. They'll be gone in 2 years. There might be a few left for another year or two. But this world is going to get an incredible wake-up call in a year or so. And the garbage can diagnosis of climate change as the cause there is climate change. It's radioactive fallout. That's 80 years of radioactive fallout is your climate change. That's really what's going on. And now you're going to have no whales, no birds. The insects, the stories I got on insects are insane. Oh, goodness gracious, we're over 2 hours? Well, that's weird. Not like me. Well, 2 hours it is. I was hoping James was going to get his video finished in time, but he didn't, so that's okay. We'll catch it tomorrow. We got lots of his music. We're going to play another one of his songs here now. Nuclear Hype Train. Or Small Modular Reactor Hype Chain. I really love that. Small Modular Reactor Voodoo is another fantastic song, right? There's so many. Or actually, let me get rid of this pile there because that doesn't belong there. We already covered all of this. I know we didn't actually. Oh, I see what I've done there. That was the tanks and the filtration systems we talked about earlier. All right, here we go. Oh, it's Dr. Strangelove. Let's play that song. Atomic Corruption. That's a crazy song too. Nuclear Belgium. I love that one. The Enrichment Man. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Catch a nuclear scientist by the toe. If he hollers, drop him off a skyscraper. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Okay. Enrichment, man. I love the Doctor Strange Sternglass. I love the nuclear Belgium. I love that feel, right? And I really, really love the Enrichment Man, the atomic corruption, nuclear exceptionalism is by far an amazing song that I can see being a global icon. He's got so many of them that could be global icons that you know at some point that's what's going to happen. I'm going to make sure of it. I ain't going anywhere. No matter what they do to me, we just got to last for another couple of months. And I remind people you can donate at PayPal in my description right directly to me. And at this, because we just lost our pension, we don't have a way, can't even afford to buy food. I got a budget of less than $100 and I'm terrified of spending it. We'll get there, but I got to be a beggar for a couple of months in order so I don't disappear and end up homeless. That's what I'm going to do. I got no choice. And I'm not, we got lots of people out there. If we had 20 people donate $100 each a month for the next couple of months, I wouldn't have the absurd amount of stress I got every minute of every day on my shoulders, right? And we can get through this, and I'd be self-sustaining, almost, not quite. Once I get the Canadian pension, it's not going to be like my other pension, but it'll cover almost all my bills, so that's a big jump ahead. Let's do this one, The Enrichment Man. I haven't played that for a while. I love that. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. If you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us very little, and it could very well change the game. And don't forget to consider donating, because I don't know what to do if we can't raise enough money. I'm just horrified at the thought. Have a great night. Hugs. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's the last show of the week. It very well might be a die-off. I'm not sure, because they're brutal videos, right? But that's most likely what we're going to do. Take care.
You said the world needs power, I won't disagree. There's heat in the ground and the wind runs free. You call nuclear the future, but it won't power itself. Nuclear relies on coal more than coal needs itself. You said crypto was coming and demand would explode, that AI would load what the grid couldn't hold. But SMRs stay delayed, no ground ever breaks, and the public pays out while the promise remakes. You said it's the hour, but the plan's still the same. The technology is analog from the Cold War days. There's no place for the waste, and yuccas refused. Vented dry cast containers become the only refuge. You say you lead the charge with a federal hand. Would you vote Price Anderson or stand with the land? You call it advanced, but the cycle's well known, still chasing a fuel that should have stayed into stone. They brought in the waste with no warning or word. No records were filed and no voices were heard. The workers got sick, yet their claims were denied. But their jobs paid well, or so at the time. Say the same line again, just a little more vague. Let the cost wash away while the lobbyists wave. It's the same old plan with a new name again. And the public keeps paying again and again. The words that you sign will be printed and praised with a ribbon and stamp on a speech full of praise. This is abundance, they'll claim as they lead. But nuclear won't build what the future will